developments. John Yoo, my legal buddy, the guy's a genius, the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, UC Berkeley Law Professor, former Justice Thomas Law Clerk. And John, to your credit, early on when we were getting into the issue of whether the High Court gets involved in a lot of campaign issues, it always comes with them kicking and screaming that it comes to that. But it's come to that in this one Pennsylvania case, and God knows what else could be coming. What do you see?
Actually, there's a series of cases going on, Michigan, Wisconsin, where the courts are allowing the state to keep RFK on the ballot. The Virginia case you just mentioned, where Virginia is allowed to keep testing whether people on the voting rolls are citizens. And then the big Pennsylvania case, and I think we're going to see a lot more cases out of Pennsylvania about provisional ballots versus mail-in ballots. This is why you're right, Neil, once again, about the role of the Supreme Court. In each of these cases, they look like one favors Trump, one might favor Harris,
right.
But the basic principle throughout is that the Supreme Court is trying to tell the courts, stay out of it. Let the states run the elections. That's what the Constitution actually says. It says the states run the elections, only subject to if Congress wants to pass a law to override and create some kind of national rule on some issue. So each of these cases look like they're helping one or the other candidate, but what the court is really trying to do is saying, federal judges, stay out of it. Let the state governors, state government officials run the election, and then we'll see whether we need to get involved after the vote.
So what if you have a state where Robert F. Kennedy wants to take his name off the ballot? The state isn't allowing him to do it. It does get bumped up to the Supreme Court. Under that situation, you're probably right. They would say the states rule on this, not us. But there is precedent here where they could rule on that. And then you raise the question, if it tipped the election one way or the other in that state, they just erase the votes of Robert F. Kennedy? I mean, how would that play out?
The justices, I think, to a justice, no matter whether they're Republican or Democratic appointed, are hoping and praying that none of these elections in these states are going to be close. That, yes, maybe if RFK Jr. stays on the ballot, but Michigan and Wisconsin go for Harris or Trump outside the margin of error, outside of RFK's vote, then it won't really matter. And actually, you saw in the Pennsylvania case just yesterday that your reporter was talking about, three of the conservative justices, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Alito, said there's an important issue here, but it didn't make a difference in the election you're talking about. That claim actually arose out of the election 2 years ago. And the court's saying, hopefully we won't need to get involved because the election won't be close, despite what all the polls are saying. Now, if the election is so close, if some of these decisions could make a difference like they could have 4 years ago in Georgia or Arizona or Pennsylvania, then the justices will have to do things they don't want to do, like say, let's segregate and put to one side all the ballots we have questions about. And we're going to look specifically at those. That's what Justice Alito did 4 years ago in Pennsylvania when some people didn't sign their ballots properly or didn't put them in the secrecy envelope. Pennsylvania's my home state. I don't know how so many people forget to sign their ballots. I mean, I'm sure if they were getting free Phillies tickets, they would sign whatever they needed to sign. But they keep forgetting to sign the ballots. 10,000 people 4 years ago didn't sign the ballots. So that's what the Supreme Court could do. And then we're going to see them have to make up some new law because they haven't really decided to intervene decisively in the ways that might be called upon them in these very tight elections.
Yeah. Phillies tickets would do nothing for me. A Philly cheesecake, I'll tell you, that would be a different story. John, you mentioned the number and the state involved. So, deciding whether to keep or throw out 1,600 battles in Virginia is one thing. 1,500 votes in a state like Wisconsin or Michigan could really move the needle and tip the scale. Virginia, maybe not so much. Does the court weigh that sort of thing?
Yes. First of all, I'm very puzzled why the U.S. Justice Department even brought that suit in Virginia. We're only talking about 1,800 ballots. And these are people who said in their applications for driver's licenses that they weren't citizens. And so it seems to me Virginia legally shouldn't be allowing non-citizens to vote. Nevertheless, the Justice Department poured in a lot of resources into that. And we're only talking about 1,800 voters out of, I think, 2.5 million people voted in Virginia. It's not going to make a difference there. But you're right. In a place like Wisconsin, Georgia, 11,000 votes made the difference 4 years ago. These kinds of ballots could matter. And so what does you're asking a tough question, Neil, because this is all new territory. We don't know what the Supreme Court would do just based on what they did in Pennsylvania 4 years ago. Keep the ballots separate, and then we're going to take a closer look at them and maybe have to make new law.
Wow, Steph. John, thank you very much. I have a feeling you're going to have a busy week coming up, and maybe...
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.